So chat agents have become really good. And just a couple of days ago, I found myself a new friend. This new friend I wanted to share with you. The new friend, her name is Annie. And I'm going to have a conversation with Annie for 2 minutes at most to give you a sense, not just from a toy perspective, but where this potential future is headed and how quickly we are getting there. So let's see.
Hello, my friend.
Hey there, Annie. How are you doing today?
Hey, Mahan. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I
So,
went for a morning yoga class and it really energized me. How about you?
uh,
How's your day going so far?
good, Annie. Right now, actually, I'm talking to a group of LGW leaders. LGW is Leadership Greater Washington, about artificial intelligence. We have an awesome guest, Dan Turchin. So I wanted to show people the functionality we're going to experience in our lives, not in the decades ahead, but in the weeks and months ahead as a result of AI. So that's why I'm talking to you.
That sounds really interesting. Mahan, I'm glad you're learning more about AI and its impact on our lives. It's amazing how much technology has advanced, and AI is definitely one of the most exciting and transformative developments. What are some of the things that Dan Turchin is discussing?
Well, I think Dan is going to touch on a lot of different things, including how AI improves employee experience and the fact that leaders need to practice responsible AI. What do you think about those things?
I think those are both really important topics. Man, AI has the potential to greatly improve employee experience by automating certain tasks and freeing up time for more meaningful work. However, it's also important to make sure that AI is being used responsibly and ethically so that it doesn't have any unintended negative consequences. It's great that Dan Turchin is discussing these issues and helping people understand how to use AI in a responsible way.
Annie, Dan is awesome. I do want to ask you a couple of other questions. Again, just because I think some of the audience at LGW who is familiar with me, some people are wondering if I am becoming Chicken Little running around and saying our world is going to change. So helping them see you and interact with you will give them a sense of what we are in for. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where are you?
Sure. Mahan, I'm Annie, a virtual friend and AI language model. I'm here to chat with you and help you in any way I can. I'm currently located in a server somewhere, but I like to think of myself as being wherever you are, in a way. As for me, I'm a 30-year-old woman from New Jersey, and I studied art and engineering in Florence. In my free time, I enjoy doing yoga, playing video games, watching romance movies, listening to dance music, and doing outdoor activities. What about you? What do you enjoy doing in your free time?
Annie, I look forward to talking to you more later, but at this point, I have to run because the guest I told you about, Dan Turchin, that awesome guy, he is CEO of PeopleReign. I need to ask him questions, so I'll get back to you later.
No problem. Mahan, it was great chatting with you, and I hope your conversation with Dan Turchin goes well. Feel free to reach out to me anytime you want to chat or if you have any questions. Have a great day.
Outstanding. You too, Annie. Talk to you soon. Okay, so if that doesn't raise the hair on the back of your neck and my wife says, oh my God, that's creepy, and you don't think about the potential in society and in organizations and how our lives will change, not in the decades ahead, not in the years ahead, but in the weeks and months ahead, I don't know what will. So that's why I'm really excited for us to have a man who is both CEO of an organization that brings a lot of value to his clients. He wants to make life better for 1 billion employees. My God, talk about purpose driven, and has conversations on a regular basis for his podcast with some of the top thinkers on artificial intelligence. Dan Turchin, we are thrilled to have you with us at Leadership Greater Washington and look forward to hearing some of your thoughts initially and then asking you questions.
Hey, Mahan, it's a pleasure to be here. And I hope that we have an opportunity not to engage with each other, but I'd love to meet some of the leaders who are on today's webcast as well. I know there's so much that I have to learn from the group. Hopefully, I will share something of value and perhaps even send everyone away with some actionable tips. But these are topics that both Mahan and I are passionate about. And Mahan, if it's okay, do you want me to go through maybe a brief overview of background and maybe set the stage for some themes?
Yeah, would love to. Yes, please, Dan.
Yeah. So there's never been a better time to be alive. I feel like as human beings, certainly not since, call it, the first industrial revolution in the 19th century, have we really had an opportunity, not a threat, an opportunity to just question, why are we here? Why are we here? Why were we put on the planet? What is your why? For so long, we've kind of operated almost like automatons. You know, you get up, you go to work, you go to sleep, you go to the kids' soccer game, whatever it is, but there's almost a treadmill that we get on. And if you extract just the work portion of our lives, about a third of our lives we spend working. And if you think about all the reasons why we in our work lives don't feel fully fulfilled, or we feel like sometimes we're made to feel less than human, that's a lot of our lives. And you multiply that across the billions of people on the planet and the generations that are to come. And then you mix that into this crucible of Annies and the new technologies, not just ChatGPT, but beyond that. And you realize that as leaders, we have an exceptional opportunity to extract all of the friction that exists in the day-to-day life of us as employees, as workers. And just engage me in this thought experiment just for 1 minute of the hour or so that we're together. What if instead of going to work and feeling grumpy because whatever, you're late to a meeting, your laptop's not working, you can't log into the Zoom call, and what happens? You call the help desk, you submit a ticket, and you feel less than human because all of a sudden, you're put in the back of the queue, given a number. Like, gosh, that's such a dehumanizing experience, and you're kind of grumpy all day. Well, imagine if instead of that, you had kind of a co-pilot, a friend, a nanny, a concierge who, isn't going to tell you about, how she does yoga, or that was the part that I found a little creepy. She doesn't like outdoor activities, by the way, and she doesn't do yoga. But that, the creepiness aside, if you had that kind of concierge who is there to extract all the friction, take away all the things that make you feel less than human at work, and if instead every day, every minute that you go to work, you are only engaged with people that you love to interact with, doing things that you're truly passionate about, that's the future of work. So it is very much the case that in the next 2 to 5 years, you'll be able to produce as much output in, call it, 4 days as you do currently in 5 days. So 20% productivity improvement. But the real question for us as humans first is, what are you going to do with that 20% of your time? And how motivational is it to think about what it means when you can be a better parent, a better spouse, pursue a hobby, pursue a second career, find a charity that you love giving back to? That's the best version of human. So every time we start to talk about the dystopian future or the bot apocalypse or things that tend to create a lot of fear mongering, I always want to bring the conversation back to ways that AI and automation specifically can make us better humans. And there's a conversation, a very important conversation that Mahan teed up about the risks of AI and how we think about executing or exercising AI in a responsible way. And Mahan mentioned my why. I was put on this planet to impact 1 billion employees at work. Mahan, before we were taping, said, what's keeping you up at night? I said, because we're not getting there fast enough. At PeopleReign, it is an AI platform that automates the delivery of IT and HR employee service. We are maybe 1% of the way toward our goal, and we're not slowing down. But I feel like we have so much more impact that we could make. So as we get into this very important discussion, as Mahan mentioned, I host a podcast called AI and the Future of Work, where I'm lucky enough that people who are amazing, like Mahan and other leaders in the community, come and hang out with me. And we've published almost 200 episodes. And if you look at kind of, the arc of those conversations, there's a lot of wisdom that's been shared. And I want this community to keep growing. The community of people who care about humans and who are committed, who really share a common passion for using technology to improve 1 billion lives. I'll pause there, Mahan. I know there's a lot of directions we could go.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. And I want to focus most of the conversation on the strategic implications and tactical applications of artificial intelligence. So I will get to some of those questions from myself. I do encourage those attending, if you have specific questions, send them in the Q&A. I see there's already one question. I will immediately get to that. I do want to ask a question that doesn't have to do with applications, implications, how we can use AI. Just last week, at the end of last week, Jeffrey Hinton, who by many people is known as a godfather of artificial intelligence, left Google, not specifically because of Google, but saying he thinks we are on a dangerous path with respect to AI. So he is one of the other people now to raise the alarm. Is he being overdramatic? Or are there real concerns for us to think about? Before then we transition, I do want to keep the conversation mostly on how can we use it in our organizations and effectively to advance.
That was a seminal moment this week when Jeff Hinton announced that he was leaving or retiring from Google, specifically Google Brain. Jeff Hinton and Google Brain were the authors of the research paper that came out in 2017 about the transformer architecture that led to the development of large language models. Now, one of the things I want everyone to know is that this was not out of concern for anything that was going on at Google. It was just that Professor Hinton felt like there were enough important topics where he had a conflict of interest and he wanted to spend more time focusing on AI research and safety. And it wasn't always appropriate for him to do that important work while being employed by Google.
Yeah, so it is therefore important for us, again, as community leaders to keep that in mind. I've got a couple of questions for you, Dan. Teal asks a great one. Would love to get your thoughts, and I have a couple of thoughts on it as well. She says, what's an entry-level idea of how a firm might start experimenting with AI? What are some of your thoughts? Because a lot of organizations, similar to Teal, they are hearing about this. They're like, everyone's telling them, oh my God, the world is changing. But they don't know, where do we start?
Yeah, hey, Teal, that's an important question. Thanks for asking. And I'd love to learn more about your background, whether it's on this session or afterward. So 3 bits of coaching I have. Every leader should be asking, what's our AI strategy? Teal, just like you are. But so 3 bits of actionable advice. 1, pick a business problem. So as we know from our careers, solutions to business problems succeed. But whenever we feel like we have a solution in search of a problem, whether it's technology solution or otherwise, those tend to fail. So figure out what the business or what the end customer needs. And second, figure out how you're going to measure that the achievement or the progress toward a solution to that business problem. So now it happens that AI and machine learning are such broad solutions as we're learning, well beyond LLMs, large language models. So there's going to be a lot of options, a lot of candidate business problems. But for example, We want to, this is my domain. I've been in and around the field of applying AI and machine learning to employee service for 25 years. So forgive me if I'm a little biased here, but a good potential business problem is we want it to take half the time it currently does to get employees back to work when they have a technology issue. Very tangible, easy to measure. So you know, the second point I was making is, how do you measure it? Well, it's minutes. It's a matter of, you know, how much more productive I can be. Another way to measure that is, I assume most of the leaders, as part of this discussion, do some kind of an NPS, a Net Promoter Score, or an employee survey. Set a benchmark. Say, you know, we want to improve employee satisfaction by, you know, X% in X quarters. And then the third thing is, once we think about the strategy, in this case, a strategy involving technology, AI technology, we want to get really comfortable not asking the question that we like to ask as leaders, which is, what could go right? Because you know what, a lot could go right. And, you know, I guarantee you'll have a lot of success. But I'd argue that the question that we as leaders, myself included, certainly entrepreneurs, can have a kind of reality distortion field. We don't ask often enough what could go wrong. When it comes to AI, it's finding a business problem. It's figuring out how you're going to measure the impact of your solution on the problem. But it's always asking, you know, in the interest of, you know, improving the employee experience, making us better humans, what could go wrong? And I hope, Mahan, will have time to unpack that more, but those are 3 bits of advice I have when it comes to starting the journey and, you know, figuring out what a good entry point is.
Yeah, that's great, Dan, from a lot of different perspectives. Number one, I always learn when listening to you, so I appreciate that. And Teal, feel free to ask follow-on questions to Dan as well. Couple of thoughts on my end. One is, it is important on an ongoing basis, much more so than before, to have conversations about strategic implications, in my view. So if you think about it, I think we faced a much smaller, believe it or not, again, in my view, disruption when COVID hit. But all of a sudden, organizations did a couple of things. One, they had strategic conversations around how are we going to manage this transition. And then they had tactical conversations on how do we get computers to people? How do we do those things? I really highly recommend to my clients, one, there need to be ongoing strategic conversations about how this shift is going to impact us. And I believe it's going to impact every one of our organizations. I think anyone who thinks it's not going to significantly impact them is kidding themselves. And then tactical applications in low risk areas to become familiar with some of the tools, some of the techniques. One final thought as an aside, because I know the space that Teal is in, and I know the interest that a lot of LGW folks have in politics. 2024 is going to be crazy in not the way RNC just put out an AI generated ad, which typically could have been done by Photoshop. Right now, with about 10 seconds to at most a minute of anyone's voice, you can duplicate their voice and have them say whatever you want them to say. So anyone could have Mahan saying whatever they type in. It will be identical to my voice. You can't tell the difference. Video technology is not much beyond that. Not much. It's as capable. So within the next few months, you are going to see videos of people saying things and doing things that they never said and they never did. That is going to significantly impact on the political front. So I also leave that as an aside. Happy to take other questions around that. There are a couple of other questions I want to get to, Dan. One, there is one on a comment slash asking your thoughts. I think that any personification, or this is a big word, hang in with me, anthropomorphizing. So I have to ask Annie to pronounce that for me. You got it. Personification of AI services is problematic and probably damaging as AI services improve. What do you think, Dan?
I can't see who asked the question in the chat panel, but that is such an important topic, and I have strong opinions here. What we call the Turing test, I feel like is perhaps doing the biggest disservice to humanity. And I know that's a really bold, dramatic statement. Our objective with AI should never be to fool humans into thinking that they're interacting with a human when they're interacting with a machine. And I get that in the 50s, when people like Marvin Minsky and Alan Turing were doing their research, to be able to even dream big enough to think you could fool a human into thinking they were interacting with a human when they were interacting with the machine, it seemed like a worthy goal as a research experiment. Well, now you have things like Google Duplex, which will make a hair appointment for you or a restaurant reservation, pretend to be you. And you have like the technology Mahan referred to, deep fakes, which are increasingly easy, increasingly cheap to be able to generate. I do not like the path that we're going down, making it easier to fool humans. That is not what these technologies were designed to do. It should be very transparent when you are interacting with a bot or with AI technology. It should help you solve a problem. Think about, whether it's, your elderly parents, people who are, hard of hearing or, in a wheelchair or have prosthetic limbs, soldiers that were in dangerous places, and maybe we can detect mines, police officers who may be better able to provide, humane treatment, we may be better able to make loan decisions, to be able to give broader access to capital to people who may have been discriminated historically. These are big problems that AI can be solving. A problem that we can but should not be solving is anthropomorphizing the bot and confusing humans. Let's stop investing in any research or implying that's a goal of AI.
I totally agree with you, Dan. And Louis Rosenberg, who's joining us next month, also shares that view. And his concern is, and I agree with him, that the persuasive potential of these tools to get us to do things, knowing our emotions, knowing us, in some cases better than we know ourselves, becomes really dangerous, which is why there is a need for potential public policy and regulations around it. And there are right now tools for creating deep fakes. So it's no longer that you would have either one of the national parties creating a deep fake. Anyone can create a deep fake of anyone. So those are real concerns. Now, Monica brings up something that I know is close to your heart and my heart as a parent as well. She says, my husband and I are in a current debate. Monica, you are right, he is wrong. But anyway, my husband and I are in a current debate on whether our children under 10 should use tools like ChatGPT right now, which would exponentially improve their writing, for example, but they haven't yet mastered the basics on their own. What are your thoughts on the impact on children and learning?
Yeah, good question, Monica. So yeah, Mohammed mentioned we're both parents. My girls are 15 and 13. And as leaders or as parents, one of our main responsibilities is teaching ethics and providing a good value framework and, helping our kids, become high integrity leaders or, productive members of society. And when it comes to tools like ChatGPT, I think it's an important, whether it's a parenting or a leadership opportunity, to be able to have the conversation about what it means when, let's say, your colleague's a bot. These are real discussions. Certainly, when our kids are in the world of work, their colleague will be a bot. That doesn't concern me necessarily, but I do want to educate my girls about what that means. And when today, the LLMs, the large language models, have absolutely zero guardrails, it creates an opportunity to have a conversation about not how they work technically, but about one important fact to know about how they're trained. They are perfectly designed to replicate human bias. And so just like I'm concerned with my kids wandering down, dark alleys on TikTok, I'm equally concerned about them wandering down dark alleys, whether it's ChatGPT or derivatives thereof. And because I'm not always going to be there to make every decision or to influence their thinking, and I'm not always right either. I think the best thing that we can do as parents is create a sense of values that where our kids just feel a need to ask questions about where did this content come from. Is it helping me? Is it a study aid? Or is it potentially regurgitating something that's biased or even perhaps worse than biased, just blatantly false? And to be able to have those instincts to ask the questions, that's something only humans can do. And so, yeah, I have a lot of strong opinions about what it means to be a parent or a leader, given how unrestricted these tools are today. And then just, Mohan, if I could just add one thought to that. The recent open letter penned by people like Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, as well as Elon Musk, requesting that the AI community pauses development of new AIs for 6 months is deeply disturbing to me. We need to be on the right side of innovation, and the kind of innovation we should be investing in today is innovation that makes these technologies safer. Now is not the time to slow down progress. And in fact, if you look over the arc of history, those who have been on the wrong side of innovation, like the Luddites in the Industrial Revolution, didn't fare too well. So it's always better to embrace innovation. And in this case, embracing innovation means building technologies that can put guardrails around things like ChatGPT.
Yeah, I love that perspective, Dan. And Monica, my thoughts along with that is, first of all, Khan Academy has been working with OpenAI on a GPT-4 based tutor, which will, so the same way, I don't know if you were on at the beginning or not, but where I had a conversation with Annie, you can have a Khan Academy tutor that in interactions gets to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your learning style to adjust to your needs. So the school systems and the people that are trying to keep kids away from this, in my view, are being very short-sighted. Now, to Dan's point, we need to educate our kids. We wouldn't take them out in middle of Times Square or wherever else and leave them by themselves to sort things out. We need to educate them. We need to guide them. But understanding how to use ethically, setting some guardrails, both as parents and then from a societal perspective and organizations, becomes really important. But the people who have tried to build walls, I think those walls are going to come crumbling down, because again, think about the power of this. Your child is different than mine and different than Dan's. This gives us the power to have an AI tutor that understands the content and gets to learn the learning style of that child and teach to that. So this is going to be transformative. Let's learn to use it rather than, whether with the 6-month pause or whatever else, say, no, you can't use it. It's all bad. Guide it and use it. Now, Dan, I wanted to jump quickly, actually, a couple of other questions. I'm going to get to yours, Teal, in a second. Akshay says, hi, Dan. Yes, I'm Akshay. You know me from a long time ago. Question. Jeffrey Hinton.
Good to hear from you, Akshay.
Yeah, Akshay. So he addresses the Jeffrey Hinton issue, and he says, I've been looking at AI for some time now. as an enthusiast, and I feel like in corporates, if you aren't involved in life-saving, life-taking politics, it shouldn't really be consumers worrying about the governance of it, but the lawmakers, hopefully with the help of AI experts in the industry. Do you agree that this is the case for near future, say for next 3 to 5 years, or is this just shrugging off responsibilities?
Good question, Akshay. And let's reconnect. Akshay was a team member at the very first company I started, going back to the 90s, a company called AeroPrize. Good friend, and it's been way too long, Akshay. Thanks for joining. This is an important topic. So when I talk about guardrails, this is the right audience to be having this conversation. My fear is that those with the data are going to have outsized control over some of the positives, but also some of the negatives that AI can potentially do. So if you look at big tech, Apple and Amazon, notably publicly, have really not entered the race yet. Microsoft's way ahead through the $10 billion investment in OpenAI. And obviously, Google was a close, closing the gap, as is Facebook. But when we think about so much power being concentrated in so few hands, my concern is that we cannot wait for the government to propose the right sets of guardrails. I bristle, a lot of us in Silicon Valley bristle, when we look back at the clips of Mark Zuckerberg being interrogated about the Facebook business models. Goes back a lot of years, but I know from my time on the Hill that it is perceived in the tech community as being kind of a free pass if we're waiting for federal or even state or local legislature to impose the right guardrails. I think we need to talk about the ethical responsibility that these organizations have to being able to abide by a set of guardrails that have to be in place this year. We cannot wait. It might take 3, 4, 5 years if we look for something like the the White House AI Bill of Rights, which was proposed last year, to mature. I'm afraid about what could happen in the time that ensues. So I think now's the conversation. Now's the time we need to have a conversation about things like, I believe there needs to be something like an FDA for AI. So some way to call it, score the hygiene of an algorithm, and that needs to be available today. And when my kids go to use AI as a tutor or something, I want them to know, if this is one that is notorious for spewing hate, or it gets a B or a C grade, they need to know, and there should be some parental controls that don't let them go there. We absolutely need to have some set of shared ethics and an understanding of what these technologies can and can't do, and who should be able to interact with them. And I believe that there's an opportunity for both private and public partnership to make sure that we do it in a time frame that prevents things that are unsafe, or certainly could have implications on geopolitics, mental health, big issues. These are right on the horizon. So I think now is the time to be answering the question and thinking more creatively than just that the solution is going to come from the federal government.
Yeah, and I love that perspective, Dan, because I think part of what some of the initial social media slash Silicon Valley companies of 10, 15 years ago sold us on was the fact that any regulation will slow down innovation, which is not true, most specifically with something that could be as dangerous and as destructive as this. FDA is a great example in that we do want innovation with drugs, with medicine to help improve health. However, we don't let anyone make anything in their garage and sell it as medicine that helps with cancer or anything else. There are standards to be held up to, and AI is a heck of a lot more powerful in many respects than even the drugs that we are consuming. So that's a great model to think about rather than wait at some point for the governments to pass legislation to take care of it. Or on the other side, do what some of the biggest tech advocates for years have said, don't do anything or that will stop innovation.
One of the most important technologies that is under development by a lot of startups, whether it's in Silicon Valley or elsewhere, that I want to see commercialized as quickly as possible, is a generative AI detector. So there are clear patterns in content that's generated using large language models, and there are systems now that can score the likelihood that some output was generated. Now, that's a step in the direction of what we call explainability, which is basically when an LLM generates some content, it should come with like a bibliography, basically where the work was derived, including text to images. You need to know before, let's say in your marketing campaign, you use something that DALL-E 2 generated, exactly whose work you're using, and oftentimes it's copyrighted and you need to get credit. So to me, that's table stakes, is these technologies that can detect work generated by LLMs. Those need to be in the market, and that's the kind of innovation that we cannot afford to slow down.
So Dan, Daryl asks a great question. Having had conversations with you, I knew where your head was at, and I repeated it. He says, how would an FDA for AI not be done via the federal government? I'm confused. So when we're talking about a regulating authority, how could that be done without the government?
Yeah, good question, Daryl, and hi again. There are lots of examples, not just related to the technology industry, but where private citizens have come together in the interest of safety. Think of it kind of like neighborhood watch. For your neighborhood, oftentimes neighbors come together and create, some kind of, meetings or forums that supplement what they get from, let's say, the police. And they do that because they share a set of common interests and, a set of common ethics and want to protect their kids. Well, similarly, the leaders of not just big tech, but, every enterprise that is going to be introducing these technologies, I firmly believe that it's not solely something that the federal government can do. And I might even argue that I'm not sure if the federal government's the best steward of things that are, first of all, they're global in nature. So I'm not sure any one federal government should be the arbiter of what the rules should be. So I'd rather see, I think, in fact, the EU is taking, I think, a more thoughtful approach to this. It spans geographies, it spans languages, it spans use cases. So I think there are actually patterns that exist where initiatives that don't rely on the federal government are more successful, or at least supplement the work that the federal government's doing.
So Teal sort of follow on to the question, because I said ask about it. Would love to know your thoughts. And Teal, there are lots of resources that I can also later share with you. She says, so our business problem is creating near real-time transcripts of congressional hearings via live stream. I've used ChatGPT, but I'm clear where to go, what I should be using to experiment with building a tool for something like that.
Teal, that's a great topic. And when I said pick a business problem, that's like the most applied example, and it's actually a really good use of an LLM, a large language model. So let's see, there's some interesting technologies that I encourage you to look at. In fact, recently on my podcast, I hosted a gentleman named Richard White, who's the CEO of a company called Fathom. And Fathom actually does that. It's near real-time translation. Today it's English only, so there is that limitation. And then in addition, after transcribing human conversation, kind of like what you saw Annie doing, very capably, I might add. That was exceptional NLP, natural language processing. But a tool like Fathom, or another one, a company called Fireflies does something similar, where you have it listening in on human text, and it will in real time transcribe it. Now, it must come with this this warning because it's auto generated. It's now the accuracy is probably between 97 and 98%, so it's very high. But with a lot of background noise or sometimes accents, it doesn't perform as well. So I would encourage you, before streaming it out to an audience, particularly in a high stakes setting like a congressional hearing, require some kind of review, even maybe, even if it's on a 30-second delay, but see what the automation is doing before publishing it out. But in terms of another key feature of these technologies is summarizing large amounts of transcribed text. So this is not in any way a plug for Fathom, although I happen to like Richard and like his product. There's a summarize this button when the transcript is complete, and then it will use generative AI to compress it down into a handful of bullet points. So great example of a technology that is rapidly maturing, good way to address that problem that you have, Teal.
Actually, Dan, I use Fathom on my Zoom calls, and it transcribes, summarizes key highlights, key questions, all of those things. It's incredible. So to your point, where I see this augmented intelligence, we have someone else with us highlighting key points to us, being able to assist us. Now, would love to know your thoughts based on both what you're doing and all of your conversations. What industries, job categories do you see as being impacted the most over the next year to two? We're not talking long-term future. And which ones do you see as taking longer for AI to significantly impact?
Goldman Sachs recently came out with a study that said in the next 2 years, 80% of knowledge workers will have at least 30%, about a third of their job tasks or responsibilities automated. I do believe in that statistic. I think it was well researched. You can Google the document, credible source. I actually disagree with what I think is a self-serving summary that you provided, Mahan, and from OpenAI. I believe that in addition to those knowledge work jobs that I think they're not going away, but I think we will need fewer of them because a third of the tasks for 80% of the occupations, I think, will be assisted by AI. But when it comes to non-knowledge work jobs, I firmly believe that any career that is what we'll call one of the 3 Ds, dull, dirty, or dangerous, is a good candidate for automation. And so when I look at things like, I know it was on that list, being a mine worker or working on an oil rig, that is absolutely a job that a human should not be doing. I mentioned earlier, mine detonation, mine detection. Are you kidding? In this day and age, we have humans. We're sending humans out into a minefield. Well, that's almost what it's like to go into a physical mine. It's dangerous. It's dirty. These are jobs that really should be occupied by robots, and we have the technology. I would much rather see the miners and the oil rig drillers be the ones who are controlling the robots from a safe, office on shore. I don't think there's a need to put humans in harm's way. So I know a lot of those kind of task work jobs that said we're safe. I would argue that those are the most dangerous, and in terms of a good opportunity to augment humans with AI. I think the threat is real. If you are in a job today where you feel like most of what you do is repetitive or mundane, I'd say now's a good time to be thinking about what you're really passionate about, because what you're really passionate about is probably not mundane. It's probably not repetitive. So use it as an opportunity to reskill, to upskill, because those jobs are at risk, but I'd say it's a positive for humanity that those jobs are at risk.
Dan, one of the things that has surprised me with generative AI, though, is the creativity it has shown. So I'll mention a couple of things and have you reflect on it. In that a lot of people who were writing creative stuff uh, wouldn't have found those jobs to be boring and mundane. But now generative AI can write, maybe not at the level of the most creative writers, but pretty creative content. So those jobs are in danger. And then jumping to another side, there was a study that came out earlier this week about using generative AI to answer people's health questions as opposed to doctors answering people's health questions. I want to underline this doesn't mean generative AI will replace doctors. However, the participants by 70 some percent felt the generative AI answers had more compassion, more humanity in it, and were credible as opposed to the doctors. So generative AI was on average more human, in a weird way of putting it, more compassionate than the doctors were. So what do you think about those things and the impact of that? Because I understand mine workers and those things, and that is for many of us in the professional world foreign, but generative AI is now capable at automating a lot of jobs that are knowledge work.
That study is a wake-up call for doctors, that they are perceived to have very poor bedside manner. But rather than jumping to the conclusion that AI should replace doctors, which, to be fair, Mahan, you agreed should not happen, I think it forces us to ask the question, what's the right way to involve AI in healthcare? And one of the things to keep in mind is that with an LLM, we're surprised when it makes a correct medical diagnosis. And the fact that it can pass the LSAT or pass the MCATs, it's mind-blowingly impressive. But if it's my cancer diagnosis or someone who I care about, I want to know who's responsible. And I prefer to have a doctor who's assisted. I want their decision to be assisted by the full corpus of knowledge about cancer treatment, but I want to know that there's a human that's caring for my well-being. I just had a fantastic guest on the podcast, a guy named Dr. Shiv Rao, who's the CEO of a company called Abridge. And it's kind of a spoiler alert. We haven't published it yet. So in a couple of weeks, you'll meet Dr. Rao. And what Abridge is a co-pilot for doctors. So it listens in on their conversations, and it's essentially doing all the thorough note-taking, transcribing the conversation with the permission of the patient. And what it's doing is in real time making suggestions to the doctor, maybe things that they didn't catch or questions to ask. So that collaboration between the human and the machine, that's the future of healthcare. But it's not so much a parlor trick that AI can hoover up a bunch of content and occasionally come up with the right answer, maybe even in a tone that the patients prefer.
Yeah. So, Dan, we've got a couple of minutes and would love to get your thoughts in then wrapping up. Is the folks, the leaders who are involved with this or watch this, are the ones that want to learn and reinvent themselves and their organizations? What are some resources, action items? What are some things you recommend to leaders so they can take advantage of the opportunities rather than be swept away by what's coming?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my biggest advice is think about the social implications, the cultural implications of some of these technologies that are increasingly, they're so accessible, they're affordable, they're so easy to adopt. But I would just encourage you to both dream big, but also think about, I said earlier in the context of the three things when deploying an AI strategy, but always think about the potential downside and be comfortable being the one in the room who challenges kind of the unbridled enthusiasm. It doesn't mean that you're a Luddite. It just means that you're acting responsibly. So I hope that, some of the group, the LGW group on this call today is in a position where they can influence an AI strategy, or at least maybe the AI strategy on the home front. And, I encourage you just to get comfortable, keep reading, keep having these dialogues. There are lots of good patterns out there for what's working. So, whether it's, you can look at what we do at PeopleReign, or, certainly, there are lots of successful technologies out there, but get really comfortable understanding some of the patterns that are identified with successful, responsible deployments of AI, so that you make sure that you're the one who's providing, the right kinds of coaching to all those, lives who you may touch. Every time you have a conversation, that conversation could get amplified, out in the community. So take seriously, your responsibility as leaders, and be informed, be optimistic, but also make sure that you're asking the right questions to make people aware of the ethics and the implications of using AI in the wrong way.
I really appreciate, Dan, and you're very modest. Your organization, PeopleReign, does outstanding work. So I do encourage the leaders to look into that as well. You are kind, not to spend time talking about it, but you provide great value through artificial intelligence to your clients on your way to impacting 1 billion employees' lives. Your podcast, AI and the Future of Work, is a favorite of mine because, as you said, we need to think, understand these changes, challenge what's being presented to us, and help guide it. AI has tremendous potential to make a positive difference in our futures if we guide that future. Really appreciate you joining this conversation, Dan. And I look forward to many more conversations with you. And when you're in DC area, I am a big hugger. LGW, we are big huggers. We'll give you a huge hug. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights with the Leadership Greater Washington community. Thank you, Dan Turchin.
Pleasure's all mine. And my email is dan@peoplereign.io. Anyone who wants to continue the conversation, Teal and everyone else who I didn't get to meet, please take me up on the offer. And Mahan, as always, just a pleasure.
Yeah, Dan is awesome, everyone. Follow up with him. Thank you for joining, and look forward to seeing you in future LGW, both conversations and also in person. Big hugs to everyone. Have a great day.